Raffaele, have you got your trainers laced up?
Yes. At least 18 months we have our trainers laced up.
Yeah, I am delighted that you have joined us today. Let me introduce you properly. So you work for NatWest, okay? You are the bank that is leading the way on VRPs, and you are their senior API commercialization manager, okay? So what I would like to do, Rafe, with the 15 minutes that we've got together, is I'd like us to talk about, at a high level, what you're doing in VRPs, and then I want to get under the bonnet. So in terms of setting the scene for everybody, if we may, okay, we spoke to you earlier in the year about VRPs, but what is your proposition, and you know, what's moved on since then? Paint the picture, please.
It's a good question. So I guess, first of all, I would say for us, not just VRP, but account-to-account payment is a strategic part of our payment proposition. So I mean, we went through a review in terms of how we see payment evolving. So for us, for NatWest, account-to-account is something that is strategically relevant. So this is an important point, because this give us more power to do what we want to do in the account-to-account space, specifically on VRP. In terms of what we have done over the last over the first quarter of the year, I would say good progress. Overall, I guess, you know, we are live with a bunch of use cases in terms of VRP. So we are demonstrating it. I mean, this can work, and we have also done some good progress in terms of our bilateral agreements, so the contractuals that we need to have with PISP, as well as liability model that we are enforcing within those contracts, and start to create an initial dispute process. Most important, yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more around the bilateral agreements in a moment, but sort of at a high level, do you want to just paint some pictures of the use cases you're seeing for our audience?
Use cases are quite broad, so I guess definitely there is a lot in terms of charity donation. That's one, but a lot of traction is on the card on file. So anything that can be using VRP as an alternative to card on file is becoming more and more relevant. And on that space, again, that's probably the important point. We are in conversation with via a couple of PISP. We are in conversation with a couple of large merchants. And again, what a good 2023 would like for me is if we can eventually create a TFL moment in which we can announce a large merchant using VRP, which I think this can accelerate create even more momentum on the back of all those JROC conversations.
That's a great segue to talk about JROC, because it did explicitly, probably the first time that I've ever seen it anyway, did explicitly, you know, lay out an ambition, a real ambition for open banking payments, retail payments, and then you've got that emphasis on VRP. So, you know, what are your early stage reactions? It only came out on Monday. You know, everybody is reading it, digesting it. So within those sort of guardrails, what are your first reactions of the JROC report, particularly around VRP and the MVP for multilateral agreements?
Yeah. Well, overall, I guess, overall positive feedback. So again, is something that, by the way, was something that we were expecting something to move in that direction, but overall positive. I think there is a lot. So I think there are probably some more than 29, 30 items that need to be unlocked over 2 years. So I guess, to me, we need to be quite programmatic on how we are going to tackle all of those, because again, there is a risk to open never-ending conversation. So I think we need to be very, very focused on how we are going to tackling all those points. I think I'm also quite happy on the point about sustainable commercial model, because I guess to to make open banking attractive for financial institutions, a reward is needed. And with a reward, the financial institution can make sure that there are top-class API, top-class data are provided. So to me, that's also quite an important point. A little bit less happy on the fact that the commercial angle is stressed mainly on VRP, because I think there is something more in terms of VRP, so something around digital ID. There are more and more propositions that can be potential for commercialization, I would say.
See, that's interesting. So I at the top of the Campfire, I said there were 6 key themes, and each one has, there's a theme, an action, an owner, and a delivery date. Okay, and they are, tight delivery dates. We do need to lace up our trainers. But one that I really smiled when I saw, and that's publish a discussion paper on to your point, on the principles for commercialization frameworks around premium APIs. So to me, that's going to be a game changer for a sustainable commercial model. And that's, got to be part of this bigger conversation, hasn't it? Yeah, it can't be to the bottom all the time.
Agreed. But I think that's the fundamental. To me, that's the elephant in the room. So I mean, if there is a commercial model linked to open banking, then conversation. So bringing other financial institutions on our journey in terms of being more proactive in terms of open banking will be hopefully easier. So I think that's one point. The other one, Helen, is around on VRP. I guess the point around the liability model, I think that's also an important one. I think probably 2024 as a target date is probably too late. So I guess we need to start to mobilize a little bit earlier. And I think probably we need to start to think on how can we deliver something earlier and over time refine. So I guess probably a coalition of willing between future-looking financial organization and PISP is probably required to start to accelerate the process on liability.
You see, Rafa, I said it was the first time I've ever hosted at one of our campfires, because it's not the Helen show, and I genuinely like to pass the mic and to a female wherever I can. But to me, it's we talk about a multilateral agreement, and maybe we should talk about the component parts of that multilateral agreement. What is a risk and liability model? So for our audience that aren't born knowing this, okay, what is a risk and liability model? I know because I am the founder and former chief executive of a card issuer. But to others that are new to what is a growing industry, do we want to unpack that a bit?
Yeah, in terms of what is in a very simplistic term, to me is so we are VRP is a payment method that by definition is a payment method without a scheme. So in simple terms, we all know, every one of us has an opinion on the scheme, but I think one point that we should agree on the scheme is that they are great on providing industry-wide rule book in terms of if something goes wrong with a payment solution. So if there is an unhappy path, how those kind of unhappy paths are going to be managed, how those kind of unhappy paths are going to be treated. So if something goes wrong with a payment, who's liable for what, and what is the process? So I guess those to me are fundamental points that we need to have in place to make the end user of VRP, the customer, comfortable of using a new payment method. Because I guess a payment method without liability, customer protection, and dispute, as we can imagine, is a payment method that will have less chance of success, because customers are going to be not so comfortable, and therefore, we will have a gap in terms of adoption.
In any regulated environment, every payment method needs to have that customer protection, and that is the regulators' responsibility and duty. So I'm looking forward to hearing more from the PSR later in the panel. But you've worked with TrueLayer. We have Jana on a framework model around this. Do we want to literally just position that to give her some time to talk about it later? What's the
Yeah, I mean, we have been working with TrueLayers since, and also with other, to be honest, also with other 6P ISP since the early days of VRP, even if they're still quite early days of VRP. So we had some commercial, we had a commercial agreement in place, but again, we had also good conversation with Jan and with Jack in terms of trying to think together on what should look like a good framework in terms of customer protection. To be honest with you, what has been presented this week is pretty much mostly aligned with our view. There are some points of misalignment, but I guess that's part of the game. I think 80% we are there, we are aligned, and I think to me is a useful starting point to start to trigger those conversations we need to have with all the other players involved in VRP to start to build together how customer protection should look like.
It is part of a bigger conversation. And back just to a point that you made, NatWest are leading the way. And I know you've done a lot of work with somebody else we have on the panel. We've got Tom from Go Cardless, and you mentioned the charity use case. There is, and we will send this piece of VT out as well. There is a great clip that we did with NatWest, Charity First, I think they were called, and Go Cardless. So we'll make sure that gets some more airtime as well. Just want to move on to another part of the JROC report, if I may, and that was they talked a great deal about improving the collection of data in relation to fraud. Okay, so we've talked about risk and liability models, so naturally, the conversation flows onto fraud. What is your thinking on this? What work have you done, and particularly what work have you done with TPPs in this area?
Yeah. I think we are working with TPP in this area, and again, we're also part of those OBAE conversation around fraud. But probably I will divert a little bit here. But I think for me, when it comes to data and when it comes to VRP, I will probably go to the very, very, very basics here. So I guess again, in my opinion, for a payment method to be as seamless as possible, is required for this payment method to surface to the customer what is the merchant name. And I think at the moment, those kind of information are not as such, are not available into VRP. So again, if I look at our customer, if I look also all the call that our call center are receiving in relation to payments are pretty much coming because a customer doesn't recognize that transaction because it's not easily recognizable, the merchant name. So I think that's for sure one element that will make this proposition more and more useful. The other one can be also the payment type. So again, VRP is a faster payment, but if we are thinking VRP as a payment proposition that will be premium in terms of customer protection compared to other kind of faster payment, a way for our call center, for our back office to spot that transaction is VRP in an instant is quite important, because this then will connect with the point around building a liability and dispute model, because we can build a dispute model that is more straightforward. So I would say in terms of data, there is a lot we can do and we can do better, but I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. So I think if we look what good looks like in terms of card, that will give us a good benchmark to start to think of where to start to help us to understand what we need to look to.
So to start some really big conversations that allow us to be ambitious and to build at scale. So my last question before we widen it out to the panel, inspire us now. When we meet again this time next year, okay, so in a year's time, what will we be talking about? Where would you like us to be?
I would like to be in pretty much. I think collaboration to me is the key word. Where collaboration means that coalition of willing to start to not write just big and lengthy reports, but to write in clear indications. So let's be in a room with a couple of banks, not all the bank if the other don't want to do this, and to start to agree, and another PSP to start to agree how liability and dispute should look like. So that's one, collaboration on that side. Collaboration also with some future-looking merchants that are willing to go live with us and create the TFL moment. Because again, appreciate we have just a portion of the total market share, but we have a few million customers. So the reach of VRP and NatWest can be far bigger than what we conceive from in terms of reach of other payment solutions. So there are payment solutions that are available on all the checkout page, and they only have a reach of 3 million customers. We are definitely bigger in terms of numbers. So I think collaboration.
So, and NatWest can create that be an instrumental part in creating that much needed market momentum that we've been talking about. Raf, it's been an absolute pleasure. You've talked a lot about collaboration, you've handed me a beautiful segue to introduce the rest of your panelists. Thank you very, very much for what has been a masterclass, and you've perfectly set the scene for a very big conversation.